Hi there, and welcome once again to the Joe Roberts podcast. The title of today's podcast is It Doesn't Add Up, and the subject of today's podcast is council budgets. I want to talk about an issue which I was made aware of recently by someone who lives in my hometown. I live in a town in Falkirk District in Scotland, which has around 15,000 residents. Now, in this town, our local leisure centre was recently shut down, and this leisure centre had been there for approximately 40 years, and there's 15,000 residents in our town, and our town is a fairly large town. It's increasing in size all the time. There are houses being built around the perimeter of this town on a regular basis, and it has been that case for years and years. And some of these houses are 5-bedroom houses, and there really is no obvious reasoning for the fact that they shut this leisure centre down. Now, they cited a few reasons. They claimed that it wasn't making enough money. They claimed that the number of people using this leisure centre were not high numbers. However, it later emerged that these figures were not reliable because they had taken the figures during COVID. Other things were used as an excuse for shutting it down as well, such as there was asbestos on the site. However, it also later emerged that they had been aware that there was asbestos there for a very long period of time and had chosen to sit on that information and do absolutely nothing about it. I attended a town meeting on the subject, and it was very clear from the information that we were given that the council was using vastly skewed narratives and vastly skewed, unreliable information as a sort of justification for closing the leisure centre down. And this council keep threatening various resources in our community. So our local library has had its hours reduced, so the budgets have been cut for that. There have been threats made that they may close down our local town hall. Another thing which caught my attention was that there have been threats to close a local primary school. Now, this isn't actually within the same area, it's just outside of that area. It's in a very small village, and the school is a village school and it only has a very small number of pupils, but the same thing applies again. The council have apparently been providing unreliable information on the report as a justification for closing this school. They're not taking into account things like sense of community, heritage, the quality of education provided to pupils in that school. The reports, which are supposed to be a sort of justification for all of these closures and cutbacks, are very frequently containing unreliable information and factually incorrect information. However, that's not the whole story. The whole story is that I became aware of some other interesting information recently from somebody that I know in my hometown, who informed me that every school student in Scotland between the age of 10 and 18 is provided with a free tablet, so a sort of iPad, courtesy of the Scottish education system, and the cost of this runs into many hundreds of millions. Now, that's a very stark juxtaposition when you consider that in local communities in Scotland, important services and facilities are being cut back, whilst at the same time the Scottish Government is driving very large sums of money into technologies. And they claimed that the provision of tablets to every school student between a certain age in Scotland was about redressing the balance as regards access to technologies, and there was an ethos behind it. However, one very important flaw in the overall execution of it is that these tablets are given to school students irrespective of their economic background. So this was the first thing which very clearly jumped out at me, and it was a very clear flaw in the overall execution. So if somebody comes from a very wealthy background, let's just say for the sake of an argument, they have a mother who is a lawyer and a father who is a doctor, this person is still given a free iPad courtesy of their school. Meanwhile, in communities such as the one I am living in, important services and facilities are being cut back, sense of community is being undermined and eroded, and I think that this overall issue is very worthy of being highlighted. I strongly suspect that this kind of thing is happening all over the country. I think it points towards very ambiguous priorities. I would like to say a little bit more about the priorities here. I don't believe that it's an entirely necessary thing to provide every school student in Scotland between the age of 10 and 18 with a free laptop/tablet. I come from a generation who can remember going through primary school and high school with very minimal use of technology. So the internet did exist when I was at high school. However, the idea of every school student being provided with a tablet or laptop was really just not a thing. That didn't come in until quite a number of years after. I and many others alive today went through primary school and high school without this. The justifications which are given are very poorly thought out. So if you were to challenge council officials or any authority on something like this, they will probably come back at you with, but it's changed days, everything's done on the internet nowadays, but they're creating that situation. It's like creating a particular state of affairs and then claiming that it has to be that way. So I'll give you another example of what I'm talking about. We're currently heading, if we don't do something about it, towards a reality in which we are a cashless society. But this is not happening naturally. The powers that be are definitely steering this process. Cash lines are increasingly being stripped back. They're being shut down. Banks are being closed. Access to actual cash machines reduced and reduced and reduced. And then the banks will come back at you and say, oh, less people are using cash. So they're claiming that they're shutting these down because less people are using cash, whereas I would argue that in the bigger picture, less people are using cash because they're shutting down cash machines. It's the other way around. And the same thing is happening where the internet and technology situation is concerned. Our society is being arranged in such a way as to facilitate a dependence upon technology, and then the powers that be are claiming that this is just happening naturally. And nothing of the sort is true. Our society is being redesigned. It's like a form of social engineering. Our society is being redesigned in the name of large-scale dependence upon technology. They're claiming that's just the way it is and that's just the way it's happened naturally, and it isn't. It's been steered along those lines. Meanwhile, budgets are being cut as regards access to important facilities, important community-based facilities, and that undermines a sense of community, and it undermines important things such as, for example, the leisure centre that I mentioned. That's a very important thing. Exercise, a sense of community, clubs. These are all important things. I'm not saying that technology should not exist in our society, but I don't think that it should be prioritised over things like health and fitness and a sense of community. I'm not saying we shouldn't have technology in schools either, but I believe it's just reckless and foolhardy to provide an expensive iPad to every single school student in Scotland between the age of 10 and 18. That's reckless and very foolhardy, and I don't believe that it's a responsible way to spend money. It's not even means tested. So this is the kind of thing that is going on in our communities. This is the kind of thing that is going on in modern Britain. And I think it points towards very, very definite shifting in priorities, and not necessarily for the better. And I guess the whole crux of this podcast, if there is one, is that I believe that things like a sense of community and providing communities with proper facilities is important. I think that technology has a part to play in a modern society, but not to this extent, and I definitely don't feel that it should be prioritised over things like a sense of community and providing adequate community facilities. And that's before we even get to the issue of other things that councils are spending money on which aren't entirely necessary. This is a very important issue, and I think that this kind of thing is probably happening all over the UK, so I thought I would do my part to highlight this issue in the form form of a podcast. I hope that somebody somewhere has got something useful out of listening to this podcast. If you're interested in doing so, please like, subscribe, share, comment. Bye for now, and thanks for listening.